Welcome to the Pain-Free Fitness Podcast. I'm your host, Mariah Heller, and if there's one thing I've learned after being a fitness and health professional and a chronic pain sufferer for over a decade, it's that every body is unique. On this show, I sit down with health and wellness experts in an effort to gather as many different perspectives, journeys, and philosophies as possible. Join me in cultivating a collective growth mindset and challenge yourself to take away just one key point from each episode that inspires you to think or behave differently. Have a pain-free day and enjoy this episode. What is going on, beautiful people? It is Mariah here from Pain-Free Fitness. And if you have listened to the podcast before, you know that the mission of this podcast is that I want to have a lot of really diverse conversations with people that focus on various areas of health and wellness. And I'm going to get into that a little bit more in a moment. But just to kind of reiterate the goal of every episode here, if you can just take away one thing that you either didn't know before or you want to think about or you want to apply to your life, I will consider this episode a success. So just kind of listen and give us your feedback on what really stood out to you and what you might be able to apply to your life after this. I really love hearing that stuff. Okay, so on to my guest for today. So, as I mentioned a minute or so ago, I try to focus on kind of different areas of health and wellness. However, I'm branching out a little bit more with kind of this second season into professionals that don't necessarily reside just within physical health and physical wellness. And my guest today, Willo Sana, is actually my business coach. So I am super, super excited and friend. And I am just so impressed by her and by you, Willo. I was having such a great time reading through your little timeline of your, all of the businesses that you've done and kind of how you got to where you are today on your website. Willo also has a book coming out, which I am super interested to talk about. And I just really want to explore kind of the parallels that I find in my coaching and that, some of the realizations that I had working with Willo. So, Willo, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for being here.
Awesome, Mariah. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited for the conversation we're about to dive into.
I'm really excited too. And I know that you have been just so multifaceted in your career, and you've done so many things in the business world and the creative world, and I think that that is super neat. And I just kind of wanted to hear from you, like, what do you feel like brought you to the place that you are in today? Can you tell me a little bit of your story?
Oh, yes, I'll make this quick. I've had practice. I've been self-employed for over 20 years. And so, as I say it, I've had many incarnations in that time. And essentially, have founded and co-founded several creative businesses and startups. So I lived in the Bay Area for a long time. So I've got this sort of a geeky background, early adopter of all things like social and online. And so, yeah, that's like way, way, way back. And about 10 years into being in business for myself, after having, like I said, several businesses and startups and the whole thing, and having so many incarnations, even in those first 10 years, what I realized is that I was so passionate about this deeper heart-centered work. Even at the time, one of sort of the last startups that I was at, I was just like, and we had, raised this huge round and got an office and built a team and the whole thing. And I just was like, my work is not to be with my face in spreadsheets. Don't get me wrong, I love a good spreadsheet, but I'm like here to do some deeper heart-centered transformational work with people. And as a creative who has been on this path of what I always say is like, listening to my fears, following my fears, facing my fears, and following my heart anyway, this is the path that I love helping others on as well. Those who have a message or a calling or a gift or passion coming through them. And often when it's so connected to your heart and you care about it so much, that's when we also have a tendency of getting in our own way. and all of our, old traumas and fears and limiting beliefs and patterns actually hold us back from what we really want. So that's the juice that I really love working on with the entrepreneurs that I get to work with.
I'm curious, was there something like maybe a limiting belief that you had or something that you kind of like worked to overcome that has inspired that focus for you?
Oh my gosh, yes. Like my whole journey has been very much this. I mean, it's so funny because what I do on my spare time is essentially like research. Every single thing that I do is trauma informed and attachment informed. And I'm very fascinated with just really the psychological and spiritual integration of us being humans on this planet, right? And so, and how connected it is, no matter, and I love this, you and I talk about how connected it is really in how you're showing up in life. And in particular, you've heard me say this phrase a lot, which is like how you're showing up on behalf of yourself. So, whether this be in fitness, whether it be in business, whether it be in the boundaries that you're needing to set in any of the relationships in your life, this is this learning edge that we're always at as humans, for needing to learn to identify what our needs and desires are and then speak up on behalf of them even when we're shaking in our shoes, or take that action that feels like we're going to step off of a cliff and die, but actually we're not. It's just this very, very powerful nervous system trying to step in and save us, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's important to just kind of state in my experience working with you. I've had other business coaches, I've done courses and read books and all of that. And your approach was very different in a very positive way, especially I feel like for me being a woman, and I want
Mhm.
to get into that a little bit because we're both women in very male dominated spaces. But um your approach was very I don't want to say flexible because that has the wrong connotation, but it was like tailored to kind of what I needed and what the other women in the group needed. And you could just kind of get to the root of whatever it is the person you were talking to could really relate to. And that's not something that I've experienced before. I think a lot of the more like, masculine business coaching style is very step 1, step 2, step 3. If you don't like it, oh well.
Right.
Was that differentiator for you? Was that like a conscious choice that you made, or was that something that developed naturally?
Yeah, well, and what I'm hearing, first of all, I think there's nothing wrong with flexible, right?
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
love that, because it's really, I think it's more than anything, it's what, if anything, I'm helping all women do is be um, resourceful and adaptive, right? And it's what we're stepping away from. The opposite of, if we talk about sort of the male way or that masculine way, is can be very linear, can be very like, just this is the only way, right? We get really locked in a box of the only way. But actually, and this is, to me, this is very much coaching in the feminine way, doing business in the feminine way, which opens up to so many other possibilities. And I think many times people are very scared of that because we just haven't been trained in how to listen to, let alone, manage and be with our emotions. And especially in the world of business, it can feel like
Yeah.
it's going to be a distraction, or we're going to all of a sudden get flooded, or as I call it, like getting tsunamied with emotions. And so really a lot of this resourcefulness and the ability that I love to lead with in my programs and in all of my coaching is teaching you how to be with what's arising, not
Mhm.
avoiding it, right? Because that's really when we're most empowered, like inside us, right? And we're not outsourcing our power to anyone else, is when we're so grounded in the strength of our own knowing within ourselves that we then become unshakable and unstoppable.
Mm.
So that is, I think it's very astute that you picked up on that. And it is very much this feminine way that is like, I'm going to meet you where you're at. And I want to also teach you and model for you how you can meet yourself where you are at on your own after you work with me, with that same level of self-acceptance, curiosity, self-compassion. That's when you are going to be your strongest ally.
Mm. That is, yeah, I think that's really powerful, and something that was just kind of coming up as you were talking is that, the way that I kind of think about that is, you've gotta be able to kind of define the problem and get a baseline before
That's
you
right.
know what the solution is. And
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of the business world and the fitness world and the pain world has been very caught in, let's just jump to this solution because this is the
Yeah.
solution that, whatever, it worked for me, or I just think, it's catchy, whatever, right? um
Yeah. That's right.
and something else that came up too is that, I'm sure you get a lot of different personalities, a lot of different types of people kind of coming to you and inquiring. And the process to have coaching with you, there was a little bit of like an interview process and kind of a, a questionnaire. Like, it was definitely an application to see if things were right. How would you know, or like, do you have any stories about like just kind of knowing that someone's not right for your coaching program?
Mm, yeah. Yeah, I mean, it first and foremost requires a willingness, right? And we're not always coachable. It requires a lot of trust, and you and I had the opportunity of meeting in person, and that creates so much trust because you're like, okay, you're a real person. You can feel my heart. You can feel that, and you can get a lot from someone when you meet in person. But I've got a lot of people who just hear me on a podcast or follow me on Instagram, and then we have one of those conversations. But so the first step is you just have to be willing, right? You have to be willing to be curious. And I would say the only other like sort of big thing for me that I really identify with. I mean, I always want it to be a fit. I want to know that my strengths and the way that I work are genuinely going to be of help. And
Mm.
sometimes really it's almost they're either not quite ready for this work, which is I don't know that anyone actually can really self-diagnose because again, right, that fear brain wants to be like, oh, I'm not ready. That's easy. I'll just justify it that way, right? I'm sure you can see
Yeah.
this in fitness. Um,
Yeah.
or they're just needing some very specific things. So if we're talking, especially hello, right? If we're talking, same with you, if you're talking about fitness, if you're talking about business, I want to know that this is actually what is going to be useful and helpful for you right now. There are some people that come in and I can see that they're not having the specific challenges that I help with, and really they would be better served somewhere else. And so it just doesn't feel like a fit in that way. So yeah, it's a pretty intuitive process, I have to say. It's really something just like anybody who comes into your life, you're going to have a sense of like, yep, this is somebody that I can have a journey or a relationship or really a beneficial win-win exchange with or not. And that's okay.
That's that's a really good way to frame it. And I think, I know for me, the idea of intuition has always been tough for me to understand because I'm so literal and I'm like, okay, but what
Yeah.
is it? And I know,
Yeah.
but for my work, it's a similar type of a process, right? And I think just kind of like doing it for 12 years, most of the time in the first conversation with someone, I can tell what kind of a client they're going to be because of like the
That's
way that
right.
they answer questions. And there's some really obvious indicators, like if someone was to come to me because they wanted to train for a marathon, I'd be like, I'm not your girl. I had
Right.
no idea. But
Yeah.
then there's also other little things, and something that you talk about a fair amount is the kind of is it upper limiting? Is that the phrase that you put to it?
Mhm. Yep, yeah.
And I think that is super interesting because something that I deal with a lot with my clients or just like my followers and people that message me is I see a lot of that because people start to identify with their condition. People identify with
Mhm.
their pain. And then I think there's a fear that comes along with like, well, if I don't have these limits anymore, then who am I? You know?
Totally.
Um,
Yeah.
do
You nailed
you
it. I mean, this is it.
yeah. Do you see that a lot as well with those limiting beliefs you're talking about?
Yeah, 100%. You nailed it because it's, I mean, so much of this work, depending on who I talk to, right? I might say that I'm a transformational business coach, and that to other people, I will say, like, I do shadow work that is really about, identity death and ego death, because it's really what are these pieces and parts, these, limiting beliefs and patterns that often we cannot see, right? They're our shadow, or we don't want to look at them. We don't know how to navigate them and work with them. And oftentimes, on this path, and when I say like those incarnations that I've had in my businesses, I've either pivoted or realized like, oof, like who I've been, who I've been, the way I have been being, um, this even maybe a certain business, whatever. It's like when you realize that that way has no longer been serving you, and what happens with any, I way back when, in my early 20s, I had basically like an eating disorder and a really like tough relationship with my body, and had an amazing coach, actually, this coach who ended up being my coach for 15, 20 years, and my mentor. It's why I do the very therapy style work that I do. She's
Mm.
a spiritual coach, but way back when, she had a program that was specifically about your relationship with your body. And as you know, all of this work I do is really about your relationship with yourself. That's
Yeah.
all it always ties back to, right? So this is really just coming back to, yeah, this like who, and what I was going to say actually is that often these personas, these parts of ourselves, these identities, right? They're trying to keep us safe.
Mm.
They have been formed and developed in a way that at one point they did keep us safe, right? But now we no longer need them, or they no longer fit, or they're holding us back from our next level of becoming or potential, or fitness or wealth or joy or pleasure, right? And because there's some kind of basically a neuro link that says, if I do this, I'm either not going to be loved or I'm not going to be safe in some way, shape, or form, right? Your own unique story.
Mm.
So yeah, you hit the nail on the head, that it's
Mm.
like, how can you still feel safety while letting go of that old identity, or that, essentially this perceived limit, that is actually no longer serving you. And again, this all comes back to our nervous system and making sure that we're really coming back into this present moment, like, you're safe, you can do it. And I know you do this so much with all of your clients, right? These like baby steps that help them really change that mind over matter of like, oh my God, I can do this, right? Our brain, our physiology wants us to believe we're going to die or something horrible is going to happen. But
Yeah.
actually, once you realize you didn't die and you can do it, it's the most empowering, amazing feeling in the world.
Yeah, and that's a really great way to phrase that because I think it can be difficult to understand why we hold on to these limiting beliefs, and why those instincts kick in when really, if you look at it from, kind of an objective angle, they really don't serve us, but maybe at some point they did, you
Yeah.
know? And there's an,
And because it's not about killing them off or getting rid of them, it's actually about
yeah,
understanding them and having a
yeah.
real compassion for, like, wow, yeah, I can see how you kept me safe or kept me loved at some point, but now
Mm.
I know that I'm lovable, I know that I'm safe, and I know it's okay. In fact, it's not only okay, it's needed. It's needed more than ever for you to actually get out of your own way so that you can share these gifts with more people in the world.
Mm. Yeah, yeah. That's really just really a beautiful way to phrase it. Um, so I'm gonna try to keep this concise, but I have like a 60-second kind of like parallel thing that has happened that I'm gonna try to say as gracefully as I can. But for me personally, and this is I see this a lot with my clients, and it's informed my coaching style. But what I saw with my chronic pain journey was, first there was kind of an awareness of what was happening, and then there was a resistance to that, and this expectation that okay, tomorrow I'm going to wake up and it's all going to feel different. And then just being disappointed about that. And then at some point, I felt my mindset shift from mourning all of the things that I couldn't do to, but here's all the things that I can do, and that
That's
shift
right.
was the biggest, most powerful shift for me in my chronic pain journey. And on the business side of things, something that happened, I mean, over a long period of time, but especially in this last like 6 months when I was working with you quite a bit, and I was really inundated in kind of a different mindset from what I was used to in all areas, is the biggest shift that happened for me was I knew that my mindset was a little off. I knew that I had survival mechanisms that weren't helping me anymore. That was something that I could be self-aware about. But the shift was, I recognized that I was moving from the mindset of how can I save this extra 50 or $100 a month, or whatever it was, to instead, what can I do to make an extra $1,000, an extra $10,000? Um,
Right.
how would you kind of classify, like, I think both of those, maybe other people aren't seeing the parallel between those, but I am. I think both of those are classify kind of a shift in mentality that changes your actions. Is there a way that kind of like you would phrase that and what that shift is?
Mm, I love it. Well, first thing I want to share is that you just brought to mind. I have another podcast that I was on that was all about my journey of quitting drinking, and it's literally you can find it on my website, and it's all about like to stop drinking and start living. But I share in my process and in my journey of that it wasn't about what I was saying no to; it was way more about what I was saying yes to.
Mm,
And I think often with anything, right, especially with what we're just talking about, right, these personas that are holding on so tight. I mean, back in the throes of my eating disorder, in essentially like any kind of binging, that emotional eating, right, that happens at the threat of that going away, you just want to eat more cake. You just want to eat more cookies. You're like, oh my God, no, because this is your strongest coping mechanism that you're like, if I don't have this, what else do I have? Like it just feels so scary. And, when I was quitting drinking, I had to really face all those things. Like, what's going to happen in my relationship? What's going to happen with all these friends that's like our favorite pastime to do together? Like,
mm,
am I just going to be alone? Is my relationship gonna, dissolve? And guess what? All that shit did change, all of it did shift for the
yeah.
better. I'm so grateful. I would never like, this is the thing. Ultimately, we're afraid of change. We're afraid of what's on the other side of change because
Mm,
it's the unknown, right? So same with, and it's almost like we always gravitate towards what we know. So same with your like, I know how to save money. I know how to hold on to money. I know how to control this piece, right? And at the precipice of something new and the unknown, when you invest your money into something, right, when you let go of that money, it then leaves your control. And this is perfect because it actually loops back to something that we were talking about earlier, which is really all this comes back to. And when you talked about intuition and kind of trying to like find what that means for you, all this is self-trust,
mm,
and that we really have never been taught how to self trust, especially if you've had any kind of I mean, most people in their childhood have not been taught that, especially if you've had any kind
Mm,
of dysfunction, right? And so this is actually why I do the work I do. I had a narcissistic alcoholic stepfather whose message to me, whether consciously or unconsciously, but is what I got, was that I don't know. I'm the kid and he's the adult and I don't know.
yeah.
And that sort of taking away the power and the knowing of a child versus teaching them how to trust themselves and trust their own knowing, empowering them to be and become who they are, right? Is a lot of this fragile core that a lot of people have. We haven't been taught that. So we're
Mm,
needing now to sort of reparent ourselves, learn how to create this sense of safety and trust within ourselves. And that means at the brink of risk, when you're letting things go, it's actually trusting either who you're working with, trusting the universe, but also recognizing that, like, yeah, you don't know what's going to happen, but guess what? You don't know, you'll never know unless you try, right?
yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, two things that kind of came up for me, and then I have a question for you too, because I haven't been able to really put great words to this yet. But as counterintuitive as this seems, something that I have some of my clients do. This is not good for everybody, but I do a bit of a worst case scenario drill with them, and
Mm-hmm.
this is where, like, it's like, particularly when people are just really in kind of like a mourning or grieving phase about their bodies, like when people kind of are starting to accept that maybe things aren't going to change, and they're mourning all the things they can't do. And I will have them go through a few questions that kind of that lays out, okay, let's say that this pain that I have never changes, or worse, maybe it gets worse. um let's talk about what that would look like. What are the things that you are going to miss doing? What are the things that you can't do? And then I have them kind of split that into a column, and I say, okay, now let's flip that. But what are all the things that you still can do? Right? And
Mm,
that's it makes it
yeah.
less scary for them. Um and I started to do that in business for myself. I think when, especially when you and I were working together, not that you ever like did this drill with me, but there's risks that go into this. And especially moving into the product space, which I'm really focusing heavily on, you take a
Yes.
lot of financial risk and you don't see much for a while. Um,
Right.
and kind of doing the worst case scenario of like, okay, maybe the product fails and I have
Yeah.
to do a fire sale and then file for bankruptcy, and then I'm still going to be fine. Like, people do that all
Yeah.
the time.
Yeah.
And I don't
Or
remember
also
where I was
asking
going with
yourself,
that.
what's the best that could happen, right?
Yes.
Well,
Yeah.
when I want to just map for you that psychologically, and in the sort of therapy world, this is called the locus of control, and it's
Mm,
really where do you have control? Because it can be easy, especially in that triggered nervous system state, to, like I said, right, only focus on when all you can see is what you can't do or what sucks. This is where we get worry, anxiety, stress, depression, is because that's all we can see, right? It's literally, I always kind of hold my hands up to my face in that, to show this very, very narrow field of focus.
mm,
Versus, and this is what you're doing with your clients, it's what any good therapist would do, it's what I do as a coach as well, which is you just essentially say, what's another possibility, right?
mhm,
Outside of this very, very small lens of which clearly is not serving you because it feels disastrous and small and dark in that perception. So what's another possibility? And you just name at least six other possibilities. They might even be like not even true at all, right? But you at least just name these few. And especially if you're working with someone else, they can often see possibilities you can't see for yourself.
mhm,
But it helps you remember that you're actually not stuck and you're not out of control, that there are so many other incredible possibilities at work here, many of which, again, right, you'll never even know unless you take that first step. And this is where you hear me say, it's one of my favorite phrases, is like, let the path show you. There's no way with all of our planning and every way that we want to like create this meticulous plan, that we can know every single thing that's going to happen. We have to be willing to surrender that trust and let the path show us. And the good news is that often, most often, 9 times out of 10 in my experience, it shows me something even more incredible than I could have ever imagined, right?
Yeah.
So allow my sort of invitation now is like, how can I allow the universe to just surprise and delight me at every step?
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. It's a powerful concept. And here's kind of a follow-up question to that. Um, we had talked about how when you're maybe on the precipice of something, you're going to feel kind of a resistance from those protective mechanisms. How do you know if that is happening versus if you are just legitimately on the wrong path?
Mm,
You
yeah,
know?
great question. Gosh, I mean, uh, the only person that really can know is you, right? There, because I had a products business at one time, and
Yeah.
there and anytime you're setting something down, right, whether that be one of these personas or it be a business, and I can take you right to that time. It was like 2009ish, and we had just had like that really tough year financially, like that economic sort of birth that had happened. And I was at this brink where I was just like, I had done this product business for a couple of years. I'd seen like a modicum of success, but all my money was going back into it. And it was so much work. I mean, the business that I had like a lot of inventory, and it just was like manual labor. And
Yeah. Right.
it just was a lot. And I remember just being at this precipice. It was like, okay, I can either double down on this because, ideally because I love it and it's going to be successful and I can see the possibilities for it. But I didn't feel that. And the double down was going to mean I was going to need to take out a loan and really like be serious about this next level I was going to take it to. But everything in my body, when I really looked at it, was like, this just feels hard. And I don't really like it. I don't really want to do this anymore. And the part that I was holding on so tight to was actually all of the people who had supported me and had come on board and loved my products and loved what I was doing. And I felt like I was letting them down somehow. And that piece actually felt like almost the hardest part to reckon with, of like, I will let them down, or what, and not the least of which is like, what the heck am I going to do next, when again my
Mm.
identity had sort of gotten wrapped up in this, what was at one time this big amazing new exciting thing for me, that was just no longer feeling that way, right? So you get new information. And yeah, and there's often gonna be a time. I mean, sometimes you can leap into something else that feels exciting and brand new, but there's often a time of, like, I always like to hearken this back to almost like nature, which is like the fallow, the death, the dying, where there's nothing growing, and this is where you have grieve. It's dark. You are like, at some point you're like, I don't think I'm ever going to see the sun shining, and nothing's going to grow ever again. It just is like the ground is just,
Mm.
nothing's there, and then all of a sudden spring comes and the sunshine comes out again and the sprouts start to bloom again. And you remember that you do have all this life and aliveness and possibility. And I feel like with this journey, that's why I call them incarnations, because it's like I've had to
Mm.
die many times, right? And guess what? We are reborn again.
It sounds like kind of what I'm hearing is, as a good kind of rule of thumb, if you're wondering whether you're on the right path, like if your struggle is just kind of like standard, this is me breaking through barriers, so on and so forth, versus if you're like, am I doing the right thing? If you look forward to, let's say you achieve the most success that you possibly could doing that thing, does that like does your life look like something that you would want it to look like, right? That's kind of sounds like what I'm hearing. Does that sound right?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many layers to this, Mariah, because
Yeah.
I love the topic of alignment. And I
Yeah.
think that we can have many times, I'll use myself as an example here because I've been in this place so many times. I love the work I do, love it. I don't think I ever could do anything else. I'm so passionate about this work. But do I not still have days where I'm like, maybe I shouldn't even be doing this? What the heck do I, like, maybe I should be doing something completely else. Like, is this even
Right.
use to anyone? Does even anyone want this? Right. So, we're going to have times that put us in question of everything and we want to burn everything to the ground and we just want to like start new. But I think you're really like asking a powerful question there, which is, because this is where that alignment can really shift and it can also help us to see how we're showing up. So if you are showing up through the lens of this is never going to work and this is hard, well, guess what? Your experience is going to be this is hard and it's never going to work, right? And so, but if you're showing up through the lens of like, I love this work and I love that I get to do this, and I want as many people to experience this as possible. And therefore, I'm willing to do the work on my end to own that piece, to show up and share this work so that I get to do more of what I love, that other people get to be impacted by it, right? It just shifts the whole thing. But if we go down that path and you go, I don't know, man. If I, this is where you've heard me talk about the energetic flows sign, that there's a lot of times where we are not growing our business because the vision that we have in our head of what that grown business looks like is one that we do not want. And that's a really powerful awareness to have right out of the gate, right?
Yeah.
Because even if you're, again, right, it might just be something you're creating, like, so, but in your product business, I'll bet you can paint a picture of that where it is passive income for you. You're getting beautiful responses all the time. Yes, you might need to be managing a team. Yes, you might need to explore different ways of scaling, but you're building this empire. And does that feel exciting for you? Right. But if you went down that road and you were like, these are just not conversations I'm wanting to be having, I don't even like having them now, like then you might know, like, I don't know that this is, like, I always use this as an example, is like, Uber. When Uber came out, everyone was like, "Oh, it's genius! Oh my god!" Like, why didn't I think of that? But guess what? The conversations that Uber has to have all the time are with basically like taxi drivers and the politics of cities, and like that's the business that they're in. Is having to get
Mm.
all this like. I mean, it's a whole different business on the back end, and that's what you have to know. Like, are these the conversations you want to be having all day every day? If you could just get paid to do whatever, it's almost like, are these the problems that you're willing to carry or the challenges you're willing to do
Mm.
for this to be successful? And if that's really really off, so in my inventory business, that was just like a clear no for me. I was just like, stuff stresses me out, inventory management, like, and I was like, I don't want product business anymore, and that's where I
Yeah.
stopped doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. Similar experience when I owned my gym, and I really liked, that was a goal that I had had for a long time, and I was doing pretty well at it. Like, I was good at it. But I just felt like I was swimming upstream all the time. And I remember thinking, like,
Yeah.
what is the next logical step here if I decided to grow this business? And it might be, just getting more clients, maybe opening more locations, things like that. And the idea of doing that, I was just like, I do not want to do that. And ultimately I walked away because it was like, if that's not what I want to do, it's not in my personality to just kind of let something be the way that it is. So I'm not,
Yeah.
I can't, like, why am I spending time doing this? And since then, life has gotten easier, and I don't feel like I'm just fighting to do everything. And that's a good feeling. That's alignment,
And
right?
the beautiful,
Yeah.
you're a beautiful example of the fact that there were so many other possibilities to stay connected to your passion, and that's
Mhm.
actually, the thread I can tie through all of my incarnations is really like lighting people up, right? Whether that, and it's actually the thread I can tie through for me specifically in my work. For
Mm.
me, I am an expressionist. And my expression has come out as a designer, as a product creator, as a video creator, a course creator, a coach, a speaker, right? Being on podcasts like this, that is actually the essence of who I am that gets to be sort of exercised in all these beautiful ways, right? So there's this essence of who you are, and there's so many different ways that it can be out in the world. So you're a great example of that. Like you were still doing your passion and what you love doing. You just found a different container, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And that I think is a really nice way to approach kind of that multi-passionate thing, because that's another thing. And I think I want to segue this into your book a little bit because it sounds like it touches on this. But that's another differentiator for me between your approach and kind of what I had experienced in the past, is something that gets drilled down on a lot is you have one thing. You have one thing and that's it.
Mm,
Um, Everything
right.
else you shove to the side, you just focus on this singular thing, and that just always made me miserable. And so I like that you're saying, I'm a creative person, and that's the thread. That's my thing, right?
Yeah,
Same here, and it
that's right.
might not make sense to everybody, but that's okay. um
Yeah, I
yeah.
love that you're naming that, and that's so true because I'm constantly doing this of like, do I need to choose this niche? Do I need to like choose this one thing? And
Yeah.
there's power in that. I actually had this just this morning I thought like, who's my niche? Humans with feelings. That's my niche. Like, are you a
Yes.
human? Do you have a lot of feelings? Talk to you. Like, that's really, I mean, especially I would say I'm most interested in those humans with feelings who are also interested in growth and expansion, right? And if you're a human with feelings also interested in growth and expansion, then we should talk, right? Because it's
Yeah.
all those pieces that we just can't see the forest from the trees sometimes, and our own big feelings that are from these core wounds, usually from when we're young. But if we're really trying to like move forward in the world and get out of our own way, it can be so helpful to have someone help you see the forest from the trees.
Yeah, yeah, and, speaking of, I mean, there's a lot of different ways to work with you to, maybe if it's not coaching to, yeah, I mean, you have courses, you have a book coming out. So,
Yeah.
talk to me a little bit about, before we get into some of the rapid fire stuff, like, how can people find you? What do you have going on?
Yeah, I love that. Well, I have this book I will share about that, which is it's cool because I started writing this years ago and it's been in a big messy pile for a long time, but eventually it will see the light of day. I feel like it's already out in the world, and it really is in so many ways. I kind of did it backwards. A lot of people write the book and then create the course and the program, and I basically just started doing the course and the program. So,
Yeah.
but it's called Double Down on Your Genius. And this is really about, you know, stopping doing anything that's in your zone of competence or your zone of excellence, but really doubling down on your genius, which requires you to act on behalf of yourself and this calling or this message or this passion that's coming through you. And the tagline really summarizes what the pillars of my work. It's own your gifts, align your actions, and flourish in your calling. And
Mm,
so much of the time we have to first start this own your gifts, which is really this relationship with yourself, with these gifts that are coming through, right? That's a lot of this self-acceptance, self-compassion. And then aligning those actions is a lot of the work that you do with your clients as well, of like, and there's baby steps we can do when we're trying to work with our own behavior modification, right? And habits and fears and all that stuff that gets wrapped up in taking action, is we have to just sometimes try it on. We won't know until we try it on and just feel it. And that's where you hear me talk about what I love so much in this work is embodied leadership, because
mm,
when we can then really embody it, embody our, so but we can't just instantly be embodied, right? It's like, I think a great example for anyone who's listening is like when you first go to the gym or you first do an exercise for the first time and you just feel like you're flailing everywhere. You feel so embarrassed. You feel like everyone's looking at you. You feel like you're so uncoordinated, right? And then, but you keep going to the gym or you keep going to that workout class or doing that move. And next thing you know, you're like, oh, yeah, look at me. Like I'm a pro. Like I belong here. I know this move. I'm getting so good at this move, right? So in the beginning, whether it be you're wanting to show up on Instagram more or you're wanting to send newsletters more, these like learning edges that you haven't been doing before, but you know are going to benefit you to get you where you want to go, it's going to feel messy and awkward and kind of crazy and out there. But if you can settle your nervous system enough as you take those baby steps, next thing you know, you're like, I can do this. I mean, I see you, Mariah. You're amazing. Like at your reels and Instagram, you got that down. And that is this embodied leadership, this embodied experience that you have that's no longer scary for you because you've been showing up and doing
Oh man, that sounds awesome. And I saw that you have there's like a pre-sale kind of on your website for that book,
it.
to just
Yeah,
kind
you
of
can sign
sign
up
up.
to be notified. Exactly. Yeah.
How exciting. Yeah, and I'm gonna link all of Willow's socials and website and everything in the show notes. So I will put this on the notes as well. But I'm super excited for that. I think that'll be so much fun to read and super beneficial for so many people. Um, okay. I feel like I have so many other things I could ask and say, but we are running out of time. So, are you ready for the rapid fire questions?
Absolutely. I'm ready.
All right. Okay. So, what do you feel is currently the biggest common misconception or quote unquote lie in your industry or space?
Mm. I think I'm most passionate about really just not outsourcing your power. I think there's a lot of, so if we're just talking about even the business coaching space, right? Um, there is a lot of like guru, do it my way or the highway. This is the way, the only way. And all these things that really are encouraging people even more to sort of outsource their knowing and outsource their power. Now, I of course am the first person to say that I am a firm believer in the power of support, and but I would love for people to feel more empowered in that support and just to work with somebody who really is going to, as I always say in my work, is that I'm really just reflecting and guiding you to the wisdom of your own truth, that you actually have so much knowledge and wisdom within you. And it's got to be your path and your steps have got to be in alignment for you. Otherwise, and I'm sure anyone who's ever bought even a book or an online course, if something feels out of alignment or not quite like you, mind you, there might be, yes, some invitations for some behavior change and trying it on there. But at the same time, there's a lot of ways that aren't going to feel right for you. And so that's just my biggest piece is like, don't outsource or put anyone on a pedestal as they are the only one that can take you there. You are actually the only one that can take you there. And if you find
Mm,
some powerful support to help you and support you along the way, that is the way to go.
mm, yeah, yeah, that's very powerful, very true. Um, the next question is, what is the best advice you ever received regarding your wellness or your health?
Mm. You are your most important project. So, out of one of my personal trainers has said that to me because we, especially with work, right? We're like, no, I have this really important project I need to work on. And he'd always say, you are your most important project. And that's
Mm,
so, so true.
wow, that I'm gonna use that one. That's really good.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love
So
it.
good.
What is something that you used to preach or teach that you no longer advocate for?
Mm, goodness. I cannot even think. I mean, I've been preaching the same thing for a long, long time.
That's
Um,
awesome.
so I don't know. I one thing that just comes to mind, which I'm going to trust, is I'm a really big fan of, certainly the businesses that are scaling. One of the edges that we come up against is needing to ask for help, needing to outsource, right?
Oh yeah.
Outsource in the way of like delegating, right? And I will say that I don't always feel like that's actually the best answer. And, yes, I think we can really try to do way too much ourselves and it's not even going to get done well. I'm a huge believer in hiring experts. And I also really believe in just the self responsibility that comes from showing up and doing it yourself. And not, I think the small little layer here that I want to hit on is like just to not cave into your helplessness, um, of not knowing something, or like, oh, I can't do this. Instead, actually
Mm.
discover and find, because sometimes that's rooted in perfectionism or fear that you're
Mm.
not enough or that you don't know how. And instead, how much could it be? Here's a really great example. So if I wanted to outsource all of my Instagram, because I'm like, I don't have time for that, right? Well, I did this for a while, so I can speak from experience. I was outsourcing my Instagram. They were still using my words and stuff, but they were just helping me keep it sort of topped up. And there was a time, and I might go back to outsourcing it again to help me do it. But there was a time where all of a sudden I was like, something energetically here just doesn't feel like it's me. And I want my energy in here a lot more, because that's what a lot of people are coming to work with me for. They want to have access to my energy. And that is not going to be somebody that I'm paying, under $20 an hour, who lives in a foreign country. They're not going to be bringing that same energy, right?
Yeah.
And that same vision, which is very much a part of my business. So I'm not saying I have to do it forever, but noticing that if it's feeling out of alignment, or noticing the sort of why I'm doing that, and recognizing that I can do it, and it's going to be even better if I'm in it doing it, right?
Yeah.
So I would just say that it's not always the answer. It can be very helpful to outsource, but I wouldn't. I think we used to be like a really hardcore, like, you need to hire somebody, you need to hire somebody. And
Yeah.
I think actually more than anything, we need to work smart instead of trying to do way too many things, especially in the beginning.
Yeah, and that kind of plays into the concept of having that one rigid way, right? Because I feel like that's another thing that's
Mm-hmm.
pushed a lot in the business environment right now. It's almost like if you don't delegate everything that's quote unquote like beneath your level, you're wrong. Like, and
Right.
that's you're almost shamed for not doing that. And I take a very similar approach. There's certain things that I just have no interest in getting good at, like graphic design. So
Yeah.
I'm going to outsource that. But like, there's also other things that I'm like, yeah, someone else probably could do this, but like, I'm going to do it anyway. Like,
Yeah.
so, and there's no shame in
And
that.
owning it. I mean, there's a real invitation
Yeah.
here in owning that you get to have your way, that somebody else's way. And this is, I mean, we can do this actually all day in so many different ways. Somebody else's definition of success and what that looks like, it can be different than yours. And especially in business, what kind of life do you want? I read this thing the other day from this woman who's like, I chased the 7 figures and the 8 figures, and I got there, and I can tell you what, she's like, I didn't like it. She's like, she's in her second business, and she is making about $250,000 a year, and she's like, and I love this. This is the level and the pace. And so, she's like,
Wow.
not going to get tricked into this. Not, and anyone listening, if you want to go for 7, 8 figures, awesome, great.
Yeah.
And just know that that's going to be a different lifestyle than potentially the 250,000 or 500,000 a year, right? And so it
Hmm.
just really depends on what you want, and own it. There's no shame in it, right?
Yeah. Mm. Yeah. Powerful. It's good stuff to think about. The last question is, do you have a favorite quote or a favorite kind of like mantra? And if so, what is it and why?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of my favorites is, I think it's a Rumi quote. I'm hoping it is a Rumi quote, and it is, or it's Khalil Gibran. I'll have to check, but it is, "Work is love made visible."
Hmm.
Work is love made visible. I think it might be Khalil Gibran. And I love that. Another one that I say all the time, and I'm not sure that this is actually attributed to anyone specifically, but it's just let love live through you. And that's pretty much like the same thing, right? Work is love made visible, and let love live through you. It's like, how can you really let your life and your embodiment here on earth be this, ultimately a service of love, right?
Wow. That's really, yeah. And that's a beautiful way to think about it. Especially, I feel like, especially on the hard days, like that's a really good way
Mhm.
to like just train yourself to kind of think like, this is what it is. This is why I do what I do. I love it.
Yeah, and another one I'll say, and this is so relevant for you as a coach and me as a coach in our separate, different realms, but it's just worth mentioning here because I think it's so powerful. Is that we're all walking each other home, you know, and that's a Ram Dass quote, and just that's what I feel like we're on this, in this lifetime, in this earth, we're here to actually take each other's hands and help guide each other. We're not meant to do it alone, and that's why it's so powerful to call in the support of someone else, that we're all here to help walk each other home.
Wow. Oh, it's beautiful. I love that. Well, I have had such a fun time just chatting with you and getting to know more about you and working with you and all of that good stuff. And I was, just kind of to close things out, is there anything else you wanted to touch on? Any like closing words or, anything that you feel like would make the interview more complete for you?
Mm. Well, I'll just share that I'm really passionate about this topic of alignment, as you know,
Yeah.
and something we didn't get into, but I know you know from the work that we have done together, is I have an alignment quiz, and so you can find that. I'm on Instagram, is also probably where I am the most. I'm on every single platform as Willow Loves You, but I'm big time on Instagram, and I have an alignment quiz. We can put it in the show notes, and what this does is it just helps you see where you might be out of alignment. And in these areas, really, of on this path of expansion, of growth and expansion, we're often out of alignment somewhere. And that might be within ourselves and kind of how we need to be integrated and connected to ourselves. It might be in the showing up and that commitment and relationship to ourselves, right? And the implementation and the taking action. And
Mm.
it might be also that we're just upper limiting ourselves. And that's in that area really of true expansion, in the area that we stop ourselves from the joy, the pleasure, the wealth, the growth, whatever that is in your world, the weight loss, the fitness, whatever that is. And so that this map, this alignment quiz really gives you a map and helps you identify where might you be out of alignment, so that you know what you need to work on next, in order to find your way back to that alignment, so that you can
Mm.
really manifest what you desire, create the results that you truly desire in your life.
Yeah, yeah, and I can endorse that. I did that quiz when I first was kind of applying to work with you, and it was super valuable, and I will definitely link up the quiz in particular. And just to kind of reiterate what you said, your social media handles, website, it's all Willow Loves You. I'm going to link all of this in the show notes as well. But I would strongly recommend following and signing up for the book notifications and all of that to anyone listening. And I just had so much fun in this interview. Thank you so much for joining and chatting with
Yeah.
us. And I look forward to the next one.
Yay. Thank you so much. I loved being here and just love the work you're doing in the world. So keep showing up and being fully you. You're amazing.
Oh, thank you so much. All right, my friends, have a pain-free day, and we will see you next time. Thank you so much for listening today. I'd really appreciate it if you could like, subscribe, and leave a review on the podcast so that more people can hear us in the future. Have a pain-free day.